When the blind singer Putri Ariani, reimagined as Ariani from Tonda, stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage, the entire room shifted in a way you could almost feel in your bones. The air grew tight, thick with anticipation, like the smoky humidity rising from the narrow streets of Tonda during a late afternoon. Ariani stood small and fragile in the center of the massive stage, her white cane tapping gently against the floor, her other hand nervously touching the microphone stand as if it were the only solid thing in her world. She came from a broken little home on the outskirts of Tonda, where every day felt like a battle, where her family counted coins before counting meals, and where dreams were usually something people laughed at because survival came first. Yet here she was, on international television, facing 4 judges whose opinions could flip a life upside down with a single sentence. And among them sat Cowell, the toughest critic of them all, his face locked in that signature expression that made even strong performers crumble. Ariani couldn't see him, but she felt his presence like a cold spotlight aimed directly at her soul. Backstage, her mother whispered prayers in a trembling voice, clutching a rosary that had been passed down through generations of women who survived struggle after struggle in Manila's poorest corners. They had traveled all the way from Tonda to Los Angeles with borrowed money, hope, and nothing else. This moment was all they had. Ariani took a slow breath, the memory of Manila's crowded alleys flickering in her mind, the jeepneys rumbling, the vendors shouting, the laughter of kids playing barefoot on cracked pavement. Those sounds were her childhood, her reminder that she had come from a place where people didn't give up, no matter how heavy life felt. That strength traveled with her onto that stage. Then the music started, soft and steady, and Ariani released her first note. It wasn't just a sound, it was a story. It carried the weight of empty dinner tables, the courage of a blind girl navigating the world alone, the dreams she stitched together from the scraps of every heartbreak. Her voice poured out like warm honey and rising thunder all at once, rich and powerful. The audience leaned forward instinctively. Even Cowell's eyes softened, his posture changed. You could almost see the moment he realized that this wasn't just another performance, this was something rare, something that didn't happen often even on a stage built for extraordinary talent. Ariani sang like she had spent her whole life preparing for this one moment, this one shot to prove that greatness doesn't need wealth, sight, or privilege. Every word, every breath, every trembling vibrato wrapped the room in a blanket of pure emotion. The judges exchanged stunned glances. The audience held their breath. And when the last note faded, the silence that followed was so deep it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Ariani from Tonda held the microphone like it was the last fragile piece of hope she owned, her fingers trembling so hard she feared the whole world could hear them shake. She had come from a life where nothing was ever guaranteed, not food, not safety, not even a steady tomorrow. Growing up blind in the crowded streets of Tonda meant danger hid in every corner, every uneven sidewalk, every fast-moving tricycle she couldn't see coming. But none of those challenges scared her as much as the silence waiting for her after Cowell's unexpected request. When he asked her to sing a second song, it felt like the universe had paused. People rarely got a second chance in life, especially someone as poor and overlooked as her. Yet here she stood, granted a moment that could rewrite her entire existence. She took a shaky breath, her heart pounding like the jeepneys racing through Divisoria on a busy morning. She remembered how many nights she had cried quietly, feeling the deep, heavy truth of poverty pressing against her chest, how her family would sometimes skip meals so she could get a small music lesson, how neighbors would whisper pity whenever they passed her house, calling her that blind girl instead of using her name. All those painful memories rose inside her at once, twisting into fuel, turning into strength. On that massive stage, under blinding lights she couldn't see, she realized something powerful. This second song wasn't just a request from Seaman Cowell, it was a doorway. A doorway out of every dark alley she grew up in. A doorway out of helplessness. A doorway into possibility. The music began again, softer this time, almost like the stage itself was being careful with her. Ariani lifted her chin just a little higher, her expression filled with a kind of bravery that only someone who has struggled their whole life can understand. As she released the first line of her second song, the room transformed. Her voice flowed like a river that had broken through a dam, smooth but unstoppable, delicate yet carrying unshakable force. You could hear the poverty in her tone, but you could also hear the hope built from years of refusing to break. She sang not just for herself, but for every kid from Tonda who had ever been told they weren't enough, for every parent who worked 2 jobs and still came up short, for every family who dreamed beyond their circumstances even when life tried to shrink them. The audience didn't just listen, they felt. Some wiped tears. Some held their hands to their mouths. Even Seaman Cowell, known for his cold, razor-sharp critiques, sat completely still, his expression changed into something rare, pure respect. The song became a conversation between Ariani's soul and the world, a confession of pain, a celebration of resilience, and a message that talent could rise from any place, even from a tiny, crowded home in Tonda. By the time she reached the final note, her entire body trembled with emotion, but she held it anyway, refusing to let her voice break. When the note faded into silence, the whole room sat frozen, no breathing, no moving, only the echo of her bravery hanging in the air. When the last trembling note of Ariani from Tonda's second song faded into the vast AGT arena, there was a silence so thick it felt like the world had stopped spinning. The audience stared at her with wide, shining eyes, as if they had just witnessed something sacred, something bigger than a performance. Then, without warning, Seaman Cowell stood up. His face wasn't cold or unreadable anymore. It was softened, almost glowing with something rarely seen from him, admiration. And before Ariani even had time to understand what was happening, Seaman slammed his entire palm onto the golden buzzer with the force of a man making a life-changing decision. The explosion of gold confetti hit the air instantly, showering down like a miracle falling straight from heaven. Ariani from Tonda, blind and unaware of the colors around her, could only hear the roar of the audience rising like a typhoon, loud, wild, unstoppable. Her mother backstage screamed, not in fear but in disbelief, dropping her rosary as she fell to her knees, crying the kind of tears that only a parent who has suffered for years can understand. Ariani reached her hands out, feeling the confetti hit her palms like tiny pieces of hope. She didn't need sight to know the moment was beautiful. She could feel it in her chest, beating like a drum she had never heard before. Her entire body shook. This wasn't the gentle crying of someone touched by a song, this was the deep, heavy cry of a girl who had carried poverty, darkness, and fear like boulders on her shoulders since childhood. Ariani sobbed with her whole being, the tears falling as if every hardship she had endured, every empty meal, every whispered insult, every moment she felt forgotten, was finally melting away under the light of this golden storm. And then she heard footsteps. Seaman Cowell himself walked onto the stage. For a girl from Tonda who grew up hearing his voice only through borrowed televisions, it felt surreal. Impossible. Like a dream she never dared to imagine. He placed a hand on her shoulder gently, carefully, with a tenderness that broke the audience even more. "You are extraordinary," he said, his voice softer than anyone expected. "And the world needs to hear you." Those words hit her harder than the confetti. Harder than the applause. Harder than anything else that had happened that night. Because this wasn't just a compliment, it was validation. It was the world acknowledging her existence, her talent, her fight. It was a man known for crushing dreams telling a poor blind girl from Tonda that she was worthy. As the audience rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation, Ariani felt something she had never felt so clearly before: freedom. Freedom from being overlooked. Freedom from being defined by poverty. Freedom from the shadows of the streets she grew up in. In that moment, under the falling gold, she knew her life had changed forever. She may have come from Tonda with nothing but a voice, but she was leaving this stage as something the world could no longer ignore, a star, born from struggle, now shining brighter than anyone ever expected.